For about 2 seconds, your brain becomes completely convinced that this exact moment has happened before. The same room, the same sentence being spoken, the same angle of light falling through the same window. It has not happened before. You know that even while it is happening, somewhere in the background, you know this moment is new, and yet the feeling underneath that knowledge arrives with complete certainty, immediate, total, strangely impossible to argue with while you are inside it. For a brief moment, two ideas exist at the same time. This has happened before, this has never happened before, and somehow both feel true. That contradiction is not a side effect of déjà vu. It is the entire phenomenon. And what is actually happening during those few seconds reveals something much stranger about memory and about your basic experience of the present moment than the explanations people usually reach for. The strange combination that defines it. Before getting into mechanism, it helps to be precise about what déjà vu actually is, because the popular definition leaves out the detail that makes it scientifically interesting. People usually describe it as a feeling that something has happened before. Psychologist Alan Brown, whose work remains one of the most extensive reviews of déjà vu research, argued that the defining feature is not simply familiarity. It is something more specific. It is the combination of familiarity and contradiction. You feel an unusually strong sense that something is known, but at the same time you remain aware that the feeling does not make sense. That is what separates déjà vu from an ordinary memory mistake. When people simply misremember something, they generally believe the mistake completely. The incorrect memory replaces the correct one. Déjà vu works differently. Two judgments are running at once, and neither one fully replaces the other. You feel certainty, you feel doubt, you experience both together. You do not solve the contradiction. You simply experience it for a few seconds, and then it disappears. That detail matters because it rules out one of the simplest explanations people often reach for. The idea that déjà vu is just forgetting that you have actually encountered something before. If that were true, the experience would not come bundled with the knowledge that something feels wrong. The fact that it does suggests that the issue is not necessarily with stored memories themselves. It may be happening earlier than that, at the level of how memory signals are generated in the first place. Two different ways of knowing something is familiar. To understand the leading explanation, it helps to understand a distinction memory researchers have spent decades studying. Researchers including Endel Tulving and George Mandler propose that recognition relies on two different systems. The first is recollection. Recollection is slower. It is detailed. It retrieves context. You do not simply know that you have met someone before. You remember where you met them. You remember roughly when. You might remember what was said. The second system is familiarity. Familiarity works differently. It is fast, automatic, and mostly empty of detail. It simply delivers a signal that says, you know this. No explanation attached, no location, no timeline, just the feeling itself. Under normal circumstances, these systems work together quietly. The familiarity signal appears, and recollection fills in the details. The result feels seamless. You recognize something, and nothing about the experience seems unusual. Déjà vu appears to happen when that coordination briefly falls out of step. The familiarity system fires first. It generates its signal of having been here before. But the recollection system has nothing to retrieve because there is genuinely nothing there. The result is familiarity without evidence. And the strange doubled feeling of déjà vu may simply be what that mismatch feels like from the inside. The brain regions where the mismatch happens. This explanation becomes more interesting when neurological research enters the picture. Much of the evidence comes from studies involving temporal lobe epilepsy. During pioneering brain stimulation work in the mid-20th century, neurosurgeon Wilder Penfield found that directly stimulating certain regions involved in memory processing could reliably produce experiences remarkably similar to déjà vu. Patients described sudden, vivid sensations of familiarity appearing out of nowhere. Later work expanded on these findings. Research involving intracranial recordings suggested that particular structures connected to memory processing may play different roles in generating these experiences. One region appears especially involved in producing familiarity signals. Another, appears more involved in retrieving contextual information and specific memories. That distinction matters, because if the familiarity system can briefly activate on its own without any accompanying memory retrieval, you get exactly the situation described earlier. A signal appears, the evidence supporting it does not. In epilepsy, abnormal electrical activity can produce this mismatch through a clear neurological process. The leading idea for ordinary déjà vu is much less dramatic. The suggestion is not that something pathological is happening, only that the same circuitry may occasionally produce a small and harmless version of the same effect. A brief false familiarity signal, a few seconds of confusion, then normal coordination returns. Why a scene can feel familiar without being remembered. Another line of research offers an explanation that feels particularly elegant. Psychologist Anne Cleary has spent years studying déjà vu under controlled conditions, including experiments using virtual environments. The findings suggest that familiarity may sometimes operate below conscious awareness in surprisingly specific ways. Participants were shown different virtual scenes. Some of these scenes secretly shared the same underlying layout as scenes participants had seen earlier. The furniture changed, the objects changed, the visual details changed, everything looked different, but the deeper structure remained the same. Participants generally could not consciously identify the repeated layout. If asked directly, they could not tell you what matched, and yet those repeated structures produced significantly higher reports of déjà vu. Cleary refers to this idea as gestalt familiarity. The proposal is that your memory system may be tracking patterns underneath conscious awareness, not simply objects or events, but arrangements, shapes, structures, relationships between spaces. A room may feel strangely familiar, not because you have been in that room before, but because its deeper architecture resembles something stored elsewhere in memory. Your conscious mind cannot identify the match, but some part of your memory system quietly can. This may help explain why déjà vu often attaches itself to completely ordinary moments, not important moments, not emotionally significant moments, just random scenes. Because the system may not be responding to meaning at all. It may be responding to structure. There is another possibility that reframes déjà vu in a surprisingly reassuring way. Some researchers have suggested that déjà vu may not reflect a malfunction at all. It may reflect a correction. The idea works like this. Suppose a familiarity signal appears incorrectly. Now suppose another system, likely involving regions responsible for monitoring and detecting errors, notices that something does not fit. The signal says this has happened before. The evidence says it has not. The conflict gets flagged, and what reaches conscious awareness is not the false signal itself, but awareness of the mismatch. In that sense, déjà vu might not represent a memory system failing. It might represent a memory system catching its own mistake while it is happening. Strangely, that could make déjà vu evidence of the system working properly rather than breaking. This idea may also help explain another finding that researchers have observed repeatedly. Déjà vu tends to occur more often during adolescence and early adulthood, then gradually becomes less common later in life. If parts of the brain involved in monitoring and detecting mismatches are playing an important role, those age patterns begin to make a little more sense. Sometimes the clearest way to understand a system is to look at what happens when it stops functioning normally. Researcher Chris Moulin has studied a rare condition called déjà vecu. Unlike ordinary déjà vu, this does not arrive as a brief passing sensation. It can become persistent. People experiencing it may feel that every new event has already happened before, not for 2 seconds, continuously. And unlike ordinary déjà vu, the awareness that something feels wrong may disappear entirely. The familiarity remains. The correction does not. People can begin constructing detailed explanations and false memories to justify the feeling. The mismatch is no longer being challenged, it is simply accepted. And that contrast makes ordinary déjà vu seem considerably less alarming. The fact that your experience resolves itself after a few seconds, with your awareness that it cannot be true still intact, may actually be evidence that the checking system is doing exactly what it was supposed to do. What déjà vu reveals has very little to do with past lives or parallel timelines. It has much more to do with how constructed your sense of the present actually is. Familiarity is a single signal arriving from some perfectly organized archive of your past. It is assembled, moment by moment. Different systems track content, others track context, others track structure, others monitor the output of the whole process and check for mistakes. Most of the time, all of this happens invisibly. For 2 seconds, it becomes visible. Not because reality repeated itself, because one part of the system spoke slightly out of turn and another part noticed. And for a moment, you felt the seam where those systems met. The moment was new. It was always new. What briefly revealed itself was not the world repeating. It was the machinery building your experience of the present, becoming visible for an instant before disappearing again beneath the surface.